Yesterday, I received an automated message from the company Grindr. I'm a user of Grindr, the gay hookup app, and typically Grindr doesn't message too often, but when it does, it's usually for a policy change or some kind of technical details about the service. And you know, getting the getting the message, I had a fair idea what it was about. It certainly wasn't directed, specifically at me or anything. Um, and I think it demonstrates a really disturbing trend uh, against personal autonomy, against personal freedom, and towards a world where basically every aspect of our lives is subject to the critique, if not the control, at least not yet, of certain ideological beliefs. So I want to read through this statement and kind of break it down bit by bit, and then maybe share some thoughts at the end, because I think it is actually pretty interesting. So these are in a section of their new policy called community guidelines. So Grindr is a global community, and we're committed to creating an environment where diversity and inclusion thrive. We are into users who play nice and treat others with respect. Uh, we're not into users who discriminate, spread hate, or engage in other forms of toxic behavior. Now, I'd love to know what the definition of toxic behavior here is, but discrimination, everybody discriminates all the time. Now, when they use that term, I'm sure that in their head they have something more narrow and specific in mind, but basically, whenever you refuse to interact with somebody, whenever you deny somebody, whenever you say you're not interested for whatever reason, you are discriminating. Um, it is not like discrimination is only something that exists going from whites to blacks or from whites to Latinos. This is how it's probably going to be enforced. Um, Whites will not be allowed to discriminate based on race without some kind of prohibition one way or another. But everyone discriminates all the time. I know that if I message somebody on Grindr and they don't reply, and if I've tried this a few times with that person, there's always the possibility that they're super busy or there's some kind of technical issue. But assuming that they're getting my messages and they choose not to reply, they are discriminating against me. Now, I may not know why. Maybe they're not into white guys. Maybe they're not into guys who are my age. Maybe they don't like beards. Maybe they think I'm too far away or too close, or maybe whatever. But there is some criteria by which they are deciding not to message me back or to initiate contact with me, and that is by definition discrimination. Uh, because it's not clear what the basis of that discrimination is, we don't know, but it's still discrimination, and it happens. Every single person on Grindr does it all the time. There is nobody who will go onto Grindr and message every single profile on their feed. All right, that would be non-discriminatory. You go and you message everybody, and not only do you message everybody the same exact thing. All right. If you are going through your profile, and for those of you who don't know, Grindr will show a list of men in your area with profile pictures that they upload themselves. And typically these are pictures of themselves. Sometimes men are discreet and they will have a picture of like a flower or a car or something, or like their torso or something. Uh, and nobody will you will go and you'll find people that you're attracted to or interested in for whatever reason, and you'll message them. You discriminate. Uh, this would be what Thomas Sowell would be described as discrimination type 2A, I want to say, or 2. Uh, all the time, every day. Everybody does this. But, there's no part of this description here that makes any distinction there. And the stuff that they're worried about, the stuff that's prompting them to do this, is going to be a lot more inclusive than what they think. So, let's see. Uh, Yeah, any violation of these guidelines may result in removal or prohibited content and permanent ban from Grindr. Well, first of all, you know, Grindr is a private company and they have a right to do whatever they want. If they want to have a blanket non-discriminatory, rule, they have a right to do that. I hate acknowledging the property rights of organizations and people who themselves do not acknowledge property rights among others. This is something that really bothers me quite a bit when there are people whose ideology is such that they believe that they should have at least through the veil of government anyway, control over essentially everything, all my property, any company that I might be a part of or own, my personal property, who think that they have the authority, the right, the legitimacy to act in that way, and then come to their defense and say, well, they do have the right, and I'm going to do that because I feel like that's the principal position. So yes, Grindr can have any policy it wants. They could have a policy that says everybody has to dress up like a furry and identify based on what dog breed you want to be. Yes, they could have all those rules, and they could have these very silly rules about discrimination, and they can even uh, enforce them as arbitrarily or inconsistently as they like. It is their platform. Obviously, if you had a contract with them, there's the possibility that they could be in breach of contract, but I don't think that's the nature of how most users use Grindr. So they are free to do that, but that doesn't make it the right choice, and it doesn't make the underlying motivations and ideology here any less disturbing. So this nothing in this video is to suggest that Grindr is a public utility and is therefore subject to the whims, political whims or governmental whims. It's just that the ideology here is abhorrent, hypocritical, and nonsensical. Okay, treat other Grindr users with respect. We have a zero tolerance policy for discrimination, harassment, and abusive behavior. We want you to be yourself, but not at the expense of somebody else. Anyone found bullying, threatening, or defaming another user will be banned. Yeah, okay, so I don't have really a problem with non-bullying or threatening or defaming another user. I don't know how well this can be policed. Um, but again, the zero tolerance on discrimination, everyone discriminates all the time. Unless you are interacting with every single possible person on the platform equally, then you are discriminating. And there are people, and I had a stage where I would respond to anyone who messaged me. When I first started, uh, any, I didn't, I wasn't used to the forum, and anytime anybody would message me, I would not only reply, I would speak with them. I would have lengthy conversations with them if the conversation continued, even if they were guys I was not interested in. I just felt like that was the most polite thing to do. And over time, you get away from that because you don't have the time in the day to talk to everyone who wants to talk to you. I could spend all day, every day, just sitting on Grindr talking to everyone who initiates with me. And that's not just me. That's probably well over half of the guys on the profile on the platform. You have to discriminate. You have to be able to sort out the people that you're really interested in, those that you're not. Now, there are polite ways you can go about doing that. You can say, "I'm sorry, I'm just not interested," but that will still upset people. I have told people in the most polite ways possible, thank you for your interest. I appreciate, you reaching out to me, but, I just don't think you're my type. And they will still react negatively, and they will still think and claim that you have harmed them or aggrieved them in some way. Um, you're an asshole, you're terrible because you didn't agree to go on a date with me or hook up with me. That is a very common sentiment, of course, not universal. There are certainly people who will say, I agree with that, I accept that. But Grindr is very much now encouraging the former approach, and that is, in addition to ruining autonomy and being very authoritarian, it's actually quite harmful to the supposed victims, and I'll get to that later. Uh, we will remove any discriminatory statements displayed on profiles. You're free to express your preferences, but we'd rather hear about what you're into, not what you aren't. Okay, this is a distinction without a difference. Okay, there is no difference between saying I'm not into older guys versus I'm into younger guys, or I'm into whites versus I'm not into blacks or Latinos. There's but you can, by listing what you're positively interested in, that's still discriminatory. You're listing I'm into X, Y, and Z. Well, I'm sorry, A, B, and C, that excludes you. Um, the analogy here, and it would be absurd, except uh, the people who come up with this policy and the people who would support it are the types who would basically equate any kind of personal preference or any type of personal discretion as Jim Crow, slavery, and Hitler. This would be like saying you can discriminate against blacks, you can refuse to serve them, you can ignore them if they come into your store, you can just pretend they're not there, but you just can't have a sign that says no blacks. there's still discrimination. There's a distinction without a difference. It is purely for show in that case, and which is really detrimental if you're talking about trying to actually change how people think or how people act. You can't be overtly racist. You can just be secretly racist. That secret racism then is not going to go away. In fact, you've just generated a lot of resentment because you have stopped people from expressing themselves the way that they want. You've forbidden them from having an actual discussion, and instead of having a dialogue about the pros and cons and the various considerations involved, we just have a policy uh, of obliterating alternative viewpoints. Um, and this is almost certainly going to be selectively enforced. So they're going to come down on anyone who says they are only into white guys, which was never that common. I mean, there are certainly a lot of people who have that preference. A lot of people, including a lot of non-whites. There's a lot of black guys who prefer white guys. There's a lot of Latinos who prefer white guys. There are also people who prefer other races, uh, white and black alike. There's plenty of white guys who prefer black guys or Latino guys. There's plenty of, but in general, most guys seem to have a broader spectrum than that, are not um, racially exclusive anyway, um, for one race or the other. But this is almost certainly going to be selectively enforced. If you are black and you have a preference, this will probably be less egregious than if you are white and have a preference, especially if that preference is for white. And that's only when we're talking about racial discrimination, right? We will not see a clampdown on, younger guys saying they're only into other younger guys. Very common right now. If you find people who are younger saying nobody over 22, nobody over 24, nobody over 30, nobody over 40. Uh, you know, those are all reasonable preferences for people to have, I would say, but they are also discriminatory. You're discriminating against, and here's the big thing. A lot of times people will make arguments, when we get in debates about mandatory association laws, and you'll say that, and you'll criticize the civil rights legislation of '64. Uh, oh, so does a black owner have to serve a KKK, person? Can't they discriminate and say no? And people will say, no, see, that's totally different because you choose to become a KKK person. You don't choose to become black. So you can't discriminate based on something you didn't choose. Well, first of all, I don't know why that matters, why you can't discriminate based on that. Certainly, people don't choose to be male or female, or at least by and large, or it's heavily influenced biology anyway. And yet we're allowed to discriminate on that so far. But nobody chooses to be old. No one's like, well, I'd like to grow up now, so I won't stay 25 forever. People get older in spite of themselves, and they are discriminated against for that reason all the time. And that's just one example. And how is that okay if the other type is not okay? Uh, yeah, and again, this is just an inverse way to describe it. You could say what you don't like, or you could say what you like. And there's good reasons to say what you don't like, because it might be a smaller segment of things, right? Listing everything that you enjoy could take a lot longer than listing the things that you don't. I know that's the case for me. There's a couple qualities, there's a couple characteristics that I just do not find sexually attractive. There's not very many, but there's a few. It would be easier for me to list those than to list all the things that I do like. Uh, it would just be too long in that case. Now, as it happens, I don't list things I don't like on my profile. Uh, I list the things that I like the most on my profile. And even those can be considered discrimination. So, no surprise to my subscribers, I have a pronounced preference for guys who are uncircumcised. That's the only preference that's listed on my profile. It says and it doesn't say I only want uncircumcised guy. It just says uncircumcised guys get a bonus. That's all it says. And I will meet plenty of guys who are circumcised, but that's my preference. But that is still discriminatory. Now, it's not a classic case where people get upset about it, but I've been discriminated against for being circumcised. I've had at least once, and probably 2 or 3 times, uncut guys approach me, and when they found out that I was circumcised, say, I'm just sorry, I'm not interested. I only like other guys who are uncut. And I know that I've had people that I've kind of dated who started to feel upset because I knew that that was something I really cared about, and that since they were themselves circumcised, they kind of felt a little inadequate in that sense. And, I don't think they would ever say that they were discriminated against, but they kind of were in that sense. Um, but I think that this is just a total semantic game here. Again, it would be like saying that you can have Jim Crow, you just can't have it posted. And the thing is, the point of this is to try and protect people, is trying to make people feel good. But let's say that this works and they abolish all racial preferences or all discriminatory statements in people's profiles. People are still going to discriminate, and people are going to know that they're being discriminated against, because that's what's happening to everyone all the time. Right now, I'm not black, but there are plenty of people who are discriminating against me. Every time somebody is not interested in me, there's a reason, and that reason can be described as discriminatory. There's some characteristic about me that they don't like. Now, is it my race? In most cases, it's probably not. Sometimes it might be, but normally it's probably going to be my age, my body type, my facial features. If they know my politics, which are not broadcast, but there are plenty of people who would feel that way if they knew my politics better. Right. So there's all kinds of things that they could discriminate. And the fact that someone refuses to talk to you, it's prima facie evidence that there's something about you that they don't like, and they're discriminating against you for that reason. Uh, there's just no other way to describe it, really. It's not like there's a random chance and they're just like, they roll a dice and they're like, okay, well, I'll talk to this guy, and then the next guy who messages, they roll it again, like, oh, well, I'm not going to talk to him. No, it's there's something about you that they don't like, and if somebody else who had whatever trait that they're looking for, they'll respond very differently. You see this all the time. People who are not interested in you, they ignore you, or they're very terse. Sometimes you can get someone who is not interested, but they will be polite, but you get the message that they're not interested, and that sucks. Nobody likes to have that happen. Nobody likes to be interested in someone, to be attracted to somebody, and be rebuffed. That's true whether you're gay, straight, whatever. It's obviously an upsetting thing. But how you deal with that is not to run to an authority and say, punish that person who doesn't like me. They're evil. They're evil and they're discriminatory. And that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. But let's see. Yeah, so if you see someone breaking the rules, please report them with the block report icon button found in the upper right corner of the profile, and we'll take it from there. You may also encounter people on the app who upset or offend you without necessarily violating our guidelines. In those instances, we recommend that we use the block feature. Block is just a way to blank so you can't communicate, which will prevent you from you and the other user from seeing each other or having future contact. Yeah, see, the thing is, these guidelines are so broad that I'm actually not sure that it's possible to have any interaction whatsoever without violating the guidelines. Anything other than an affirmative response is discrimination. Anything. You could even say, well, I'm really into you, but I'm really tired, I'm going to go to bed. You're discriminating based on the time that they messaged you, or the fact that your fatigue status. There isn't any way to reject anybody without it being correctly identified as some type of discrimination. And then they have a whole bunch of other stuff that's fine about being safe and not putting yourself in a bad situation. But so the part, we'll take it from there. I think this is kind of ties in with a lot of Jonathan Haidt's more recent work. His book, The Coddling of the American Mind, with Greg Lukianoff, kind of touches on this. It does suck. It is something you have to cope with when people are not interested in you. And people can handle that differently. People can be nice about it, or people can be really rude about it. And you can definitely impinge on someone's character based on how they handle their preferences, right? I try and be respectful of people, even if I'm totally not interested. As long as they're polite and they're kind and they're nice, I will try and respond, and I'll try and be courteous. But I'll also say, look, I'm sorry, I'm just not interested. I appreciate. My kind of go-to is like, I appreciate the interest. I appreciate you reaching out to me. And sometimes you have guys who are clearly interested because they're not creepy in the sense that they message every hour, but they message every day, checking in how you are. Yeah, I really appreciate that, but that doesn't mean that I share a mutual interest here, and that's absolutely a necessary, fundamental prerequisite for us to have any kind of interaction. So I try and be nice, but not always. Sometimes I'm busy, sometimes I don't have time, and sometimes people are quite rude. Sometimes people feel and act like you have an obligation to interact with them. People will just say stuff like, send me pics, send me pictures of your dick, send me pictures of your ass. People will be like, send me pictures of your asshole, without any kind of dialogue or whatever, and they just feel entitled. And the thing is, the ideology here that Grindr is going with, and the ideology of the left here is one of entitlement, that you're entitled to people's attention, that you're entitled to people's attraction. Now, they're not saying this explicitly, but it's pretty much implied that you can't discriminate at all. That if someone is interested in you, you owe it to them. And you kind of see this, a lot of this is coming from people who do feel left out, who feel upset, who feel like that they are not getting the attention that they want or that they deserve, that by some objective merit they're entitled to a certain amount of sexual interest from the people that they approach, and they're not getting that, and their reaction is to lash out. And there have been lawsuits against Grindr. There was an Asian guy who sued Grindr and said Grindr is racist, and I don't know what this policy is probably related to that lawsuit, not necessarily that Grindr lost the lawsuit or anything like that, but that it's a reaction to that kind of mentality. But here's the thing: when you are upset by other people, by your social situation, and by people who are not interested in interacting with you voluntarily, there's that can be very traumatic, and that can be really bad for you personally. But there are ways that you should cope with that, and ways that you should not cope with that. As Jonathan Haidt points out, humans are anti-fragile. You need to experience some distress. You need to have adversity. You need to have stuff that you have to deal with. And to simply always run away to authority and say, protect me, protect me. They're mean. I didn't get what I want. They rejected me. They won't meet me. Go punish them. Go get them. And that's what Grindr is doing here. They're acting the role of a parent. And so instead of two adults coming to an understanding that there's no mutual interest, or that there's an asymmetry of interest where one party is interested and the other's not, they should deal with that themselves. Instead, this is saying run to us, and then we are going to come down hard, as hard as Grindr can. Right? At this point, Grindr is not in a position to coerce you to interact with somebody, but they can simply, eliminate your profile, eliminate your use of the service. And the mentality here that it's so wrong for you to have that opinion, I don't see this as logically ending here, in the cybersphere of Grindr. This notion that it is so morally abhorrent for you to have preferences, whatever they may be, and currently, the big one that they're aiming at is race. But there's two or three other ones that are already in the sights. All right, so we already have the body positivity movement, where people are saying, you shouldn't discriminate based on people being really fat or people being out of shape. That's right around the corner. You already have people calling for that. You already have people calling for that in the gay community, writing articles to that effect. Saying I'm a fat queen. I don't have abs. I'm not good looking. That shouldn't matter. You should still be into me. And if you're not, you're basically Hitler. You're a racist. You're the KKK. You're Jim Crow. And then past that, we're very close, I think, to having this with trans people. So you've got this awkward situation where you have dickless trans people. And I mean, maybe that sounds harsh, but it's true. Dickless trans people who are getting rejected a lot by men who are obsessed with dick. And some of them are, and look, there's trans people on Grindr, and sometimes they meet people and sometimes they can't. I assume that it's not necessarily very easy for them all the time, depending on how they look. I've met trans people in the past. I don't typically do it, but it's not something I'm totally against. I have done it before, but I do like dick, and they don't have dicks. Maybe there'll be a day when the surgery will get good enough that this will not be an issue, but that day has not come, and that's a problem if we're talking about any kind of sexual intimacy with me, and not just with me, with a large number of gay men. So, the outcry and the moral panic around transphobia is such that I think that is right around the corner. The big one that is not really on the docket yet, but I think is logically would be consistent, would be ageism. It's quite common. I mean, there's not a 100% rule here, because there are obviously younger guys who prefer older guys, but there's a strong tendency for older guys to prefer younger guys, and past a certain threshold, th- there's a low likelihood of mutual interest that way. Not always. So you will get 18 and 19 and 20-year-old guys who are interested in men who are 2 or 3 times their age. It's just very rare. Uh, and you get a lot, so you end up with lots of like 18, 19, 20-year olds who are getting hit on by men who are 40 plus, 30 plus, and they're not interested in them. And that is going to be really upsetting for the older men, potentially. But what's the alternative here? That if you're young, you are obligated to not discriminate against men who are 3 times your age, the old men who could be your grandparents. Um, I don't see that there's a big difference here. Apparently, like there's nothing in this statement that would preclude them from prohibiting somebody from saying, "I'm not into old men." That's very common for people to put age ranges, and it's not always the youngest. There's people who say, well, "I'm not into people under 25 because they're too immature, they're in college or whatever." That would be that's not as common, but that would, based on the text of the policy of the community guidelines, that would be wrong. But then you also have uh, a lot of people would say, well, I only like 18 to 22 or 18 to 25 or anyone under 30. You've got big clusters under the decade. So under 30, under 40, and that excludes everyone that discriminates against everybody outside of that parameter. And I don't see any kind of rationalization as to why that type of a discrimination would be okay, but a racial discrimination would not be okay. You don't choose to be older, you don't choose to be younger. And I also don't think that just the labeling matters that much. Uh, let's say you can't put on your profile, I'm only into guys a certain age. When guys outside that range message you and you ignore them, or you're impolite, or you just are clearly not interested, you're still discriminating against them, and they're still going to know that, and they're still going to they're not going to feel, well, it's fine because at least he didn't post on his profile he's not into me. I just had to waste my time messaging him and being ignored, right? Can you imagine what's worse? You have a diner that says no blacks. Okay, that sucks. I could see black people finding that really upsetting. Or there is no sign. You go in to get some food, and the staff completely ignore you. They don't seat you. They don't take your order. They don't ask you to get drinks. If they say anything, it's get the fuck out of here. Okay, which one's better? I don't understand. At least when the label is there, then people know, and you don't waste your time, and you also know that, hey, maybe these are bad people, whatever. The latter situation is what you're getting, you already get this on Grindr a lot. This is what you're going to ask to have all the time, is people who just get ignored, and they're not going to go home and think, oh, well, this is great because they don't have it on their profile that they're against me. I just had to learn that the hard way and waste my time and their time. So that's why I think that these steps, as stupid as they are clearly half measures. Now, I don't think that the people who came up with these policies have some grand conspiracy plan or anything like that. I think this is just feel-goodism, knee-jerk um, virtue signaling. But it's not going to. Why I think it's a half measure, though, is because it's not going to affect any of the underlying issues. The this the the negative emotions associated with rejection are not going to be gone. They're still going to be there, and the reasons why are going to be transparently apparent. I mean, the broad use of the term discrimination here is such that, I mean, it's always going to be a factor. It's always going to be the factor. When someone is not interested in you, it's because they're discriminating for some reason. Now, it might just be that you're an asshole and they're discriminating against you for being an asshole, but that's still discrimination. Um, and there's no the logic, the virtue signaling and the virtue ethics and the value hierarchy that they're expressing here doesn't allow for that either, right? So this is why I think this is clearly a half measure, and we're moving towards the point of obligatory interactions. Now, Grindr at this point doesn't have the power to force you to interact with somebody in the real world, but what they could very well do at some point is say, if somebody is not interested in you, if somebody is not responding to you, they're not agreeing to meet you for a date or for drinks or for sex, let us know and we'll take care of it. And they could then delete your profile because you're discriminating. Look, this guy is messaging you. You're not saying you're interested. he's Asian, you must be discriminating, even if it's not, whatever it is, it doesn't. You could be white and he could be white, and they could still say, well, you're a year older than he is, or 2 years younger, or you have a 5% higher body fat. Whatever the variable is, it doesn't even matter what it is. It's discrimination on something, and then they could say, you know what, we are going to ban you, and kind of and stop serving you. We're going to discriminate against you, ironically enough, which is another kind of irony of this whole thing, that we are going to blatantly cut you off if you don't act the way that we think that you should act, and which makes all this talk about, we want you to be you and blah blah blah, totally transparent. They want you to be you if you agree with them on everything and you have the same ideology as them. They don't want diversity. They want uniformity. This is kind of like one of the tropes of the left, that they have a worldview, that they have a vision, the vision of the anointed. And if you don't share that vision, then you are repulsive in every sense. You are Hitler, you are Stalin, not Stalin, because Stalin shares their worldview in a lot of ways. You are the KKK. Everything, there's the beautiful idealized world that they believe in, and there's everything else, and everything else is just subhuman trash that can be castigated in every term possible. And that's where this is kind of going. And the next step, I mean, we're already seeing it with the bans on the other platforms, which are, these tech companies are just dominated by left-leaning, ideologues who are going to say, yes, we're going to censor you, we're going to deplatform you, and there's nothing in their sentiment that would preclude them from supporting legal mandates. Nothing at all. The same people who are typing stuff like this and who are vocal about stuff like this and who support stuff like this, there's nothing in their ideology that would prevent them from saying, you are obligated to interact with people the way that we think that you should, and if you don't, then that is a crime. That is something you should be punished for. Right now, all they can do to punish you is kick you off Grindr, and they are more than happy to do that. But if this ever became a law in the books, they would support it. There's no question. At least the majority of them. There's enough liberals who believe in this stuff that I'm sure that there are some who would not go that far, but that they would be inconsistent then in their ideology if that's the case. So, in practical terms, I don't know how much this is going to affect. It's going to be difficult to enforce. I think enough people have kind of normal human instincts that they are not necessarily going to go cry and tattletale to the Grindr mommy and daddy the second they are denied, but some of them will. And some of them feel entitled to that kind of treatment, and they feel like, rather than deal with things themselves, rather than say, well, maybe people are not interested in me because I'm a fat slob, and maybe I should get in shape and do better, or maybe I should reconcile myself that, hey, I'm past my prime, I'm in my 50s or my 60s, and I just can't expect that every 20-year-old is going to want to meet me. I've had to reconcile myself to that to a different degree, obviously. I know that there are guys who are not going to want to meet me because I'm over 30. I just know that. Now, there's still enough guys who do that I don't have a problem, but you have, if as soon as you start saying those people who are not interested in me are bad, they're evil, and they should be punished, then you're just making yourself that much more susceptible to pain, to being upset, to being getting your feelings hurt and your emotions distraught, because instead of every person who doesn't agree with you then is hurting you, and is guilty of something, and you want to run away and have somebody else deal with it for you. This is something that Haidt and Luciano point out. Children need to play with each other, and they need to have disagreements with each other, and they need to resolve them amongst themselves. And if they're constantly supervised by parents, that doesn't happen, because they just run to their mom and dad or whoever, the teacher, and say, "Here, you take care of me. You solve this dispute. He called me a name. He stole my lunch. Blah blah blah." And then they grow up and they are like infantilized, non-autonomous socialists, basically. And I don't know how much of that. Some of that is definitely bleeding into Grindr now, and Grindr is just making that worse. Instead of like being an adult, the only part of that was said be adult is if someone is really upsetting you, just block them. Yeah, which is why not just do that? They've always had a mechanism there. if somebody is threatening you or making you really uncomfortable or being really annoying, you can always just block them and they'll be gone. And we've all had to do that. There's some people who do it all the time. There's some people who block everyone who they're just not interested in. So they'll actually go through and without even talking to people, block them because they just know that's not my type. I tend to only do it if people are being really aggressive or annoying, or I tell them I'm not interested, and I'll even give them like a warning. And so, I block people maybe only a few times a year. It's pretty rare for me actually. But, that's a more responsible way to go about this than report them to us and we'll go after them. So, uh, not a surprise. I wasn't surprised by anything that I read there, but pretty disturbing and pretty stupid actually too. So anyway, I will talk to you all later and have a good day. Bye bye.